Hello again, my dudes. This is Kadimo with another Dragon's Dogma 2 video. This time, when it comes to vocations, I am going to talk about my personal tier list for qualifying the vocations in Dragon's Dogma 2. I'm not going to go into very much details when it comes to build making. When it comes to the vocations, there are many vocations, of course, in this game. Some are better than others. I am going to qualify my list and my vocations in a very simple way. Tier S will be for the best of the best. Tier A will be for the very good vocations. Tier B will be for the good vocations, but where something is kind of missing. And Tier C will be for the, well, this is just not good at all kind of vocations. Now, starting with the
Greetings. Here we conduct
vocations
all manner of procedures
in
pertaining.
order as they show up on the list. With the fighter, I qualify the fighter as a tier B vocation. The reason being is this. As a starting class, fighter is probably the easiest and the safest to start with. The reasons being you have a sword and a shield, so you'll be able to do damage and you will also be able to block damage. So you have survivability and you have a means to get rid of your enemies. The damage output is never going to be great because that's not the number one priority of the fighter, but you also have a problem with aiming at targets that are airborne. So if you put all those things together, damage is not great. Inability to hit airborne targets or distant targets, but also on the other end, you will have very good defenses, good HP, good stamina, and you'll be able to provoke your enemies and be the center of attention, so that will keep your pawn safe. All those things combined, I would say that the fighter is a tier B vocation. The archer, again, same as the fighter, I would go that this is a tier B vocation. As a starting vocation, it's an absolute nightmare because first it takes used to manually aiming at the targets, because you can go with just tapping square if you're on the PlayStation for the quick shots, the quick loose of your arrows, but the problem is that will never aim at weak spots on the targets. That will never aim at the heads of goblins. That will never aim at the eyes of cyclops. That will never aim at the hearts of drakes. So you will not do as much damage as you can potentially do if you hold R1 and use the manual aiming to actually aim at those weak spots. Therefore, you'll be doing more damage per arrow. The problem with that is that, as I said, it's a kind of weak starting class because it's hard to master from the get go. You'll be very exposed to damage because you'll have to climb onto little hills and little edges, so you are not being targeted by the enemies around you, especially if you are not using a fighter in your party. If you are using a fighter and they have provocation or they have shield summoning, you might have an easier time, but still you will be an easy target because you have no way to defend yourself properly. At close quarters you will not be that great. So with all that being said, I would say that archers are a tier B vocation. As for the mage, this is the one that I qualify as tier C. And the reason why I qualify it as tier C is you playing as a mage, it's a tier C. Your pawn playing as a mage, it's a tier S. Because mages are the number one vocation for pawns. Let's be clear about that. They are a supporting class. They will be doing the healing, the buffing, the removing debilitations, the giving infinite stamina, and so on and so on and so on. So, as a support member of the party, mages are absolutely amazing and they are tier S for pawns. But you playing as a mage, you are not even a weaker version of a sorcerer, to be honest, because the sorcerer will have one priority and one priority only, which is do insane amounts of damage. Yes, their spells take time to cast, same as the mage, but they will do way more damage than the mage will ever do. And when you play as a mage, if you don't have the right party set up, which will depend on the pawns that you find, in the Rift, you might get yourself into trouble. You might summon a fighter to your party while you are playing as a mage, and the fighter is not configured the right way. So he might not have shield summoning, he might not have provocation, it might not be a straightforward pawn. And if those things are missing, your enemies will easily turn their backs onto the fighter or the warrior, and they will start attacking you or your other pawns, and then you'll find yourself in a bit of a mess. Your pawns are dying, you can't cast spells because you keep getting interrupted. So it's not great playing as a mage, in my opinion, and because of that, I will go that this is the tier C vocation in the game. It's the only vocation that I put into the tier C category. When it comes to thief, I would say that thieves are a tier A. Thieves are very, very good builds, especially the more you progress in the story, the more you progress and the more you level up, the stronger they become. Unlike the fighters, of course, will become stronger as they go. Same with the archer. But the thief has something extremely beneficial for them right about when you are 2 or 3 hours into the game. The access to the ultimate skill pretty much very early in the game. And the ultimate skill, the Formless Feint, for the thief, it's an absolute game changer. Also, the thief allows for a very important thing in this game, which is the ability to one-shot enemies easily. If you use the Smoke Shroud, you will confuse all enemies around you. This only works for smaller enemies. And let's make that obvious. You won't be able to one-shot a Cyclops with this technique. But you can easily just Smoke Shroud, press Twin Fangs, and you will one-shot every enemy around you. And you will have enough time to one-shot 3, maybe 4 enemies if you do it fast enough and if they are close enough. So not only you are safe from damage, you are also able to do a lot of damage at the same time. Yes, thieves are squishy if they get hit, but if you have Formless Feint and you can't get hit, you have nothing to fear. But there's one more thing that makes the thieves very special: the ability to steal items from enemies. It makes it a very good choice when it comes to vocations in Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, for the next one, the Warrior. The Warrior is, in my opinion, and putting it very simply, a better version of the Fighter. And because of that, I will put it as a tier A as well. Not as strong as the Thief. If I was to distinguish these two, I would say Thief is an A plus and Warrior is an A uh, vocation. Now, the Warrior will be able to get the enemy's attentions. They'll be able to tank a lot of damage. They can also have extremely high knockdown resistance, so you won't be able to get them down with ease. But at the same time, they can actually do tremendous amounts of damage. They can do the same things the fighter does, but better. So that makes them a tier A. The only number one weakness when it comes to a warrior, in my opinion, is their absolute inability to fight enemies that are airborne. Yes, if they are not that high in the sky, certain skills will allow you to plunge your sword into the air and you might be able to reach them, which is great. But even doing that, it's hard because unless they are in the precise spot where your sword is going to go, you will not hit them. So airborne targets are an absolute nightmare for a warrior. So I'm qualifying the vocations as for what they are on their own and not for what you have in your party. Because if you have an archer who shoots the harpy out of the sky, or the griffin, or the dragon, or whatever, and then you do the damage, that's great. But I'm not going to qualify the vocations based on what the other vocations will do for you. So on its own, the warrior, in my opinion, it's a tier A. When it comes to the sorcerer, I would qualify the sorcerer as an A minus. The reason why I say that sorcerers are A minus is because the best skills in the game for the sorcerer take a tremendous amount of time to cast. And not just that, it's the items that exist in the game and also the core skill quick spell, which will allow you to cast spells quicker. None of those will affect the speed of casting Meteoron or the Cyclone. Uh, so, because of this, the sorcerer is not as good as they could potentially be. And this is the reason why I would consider sorcerer is good. It's very good, but it's not great. It's the fact that the items in game that reduce spell casting that speed, making the items that make casting spells faster, do not affect the casting speed of the best spells in the game. So it's kind of a bummer, in my opinion, as that shouldn't be the case. Anything that increases casting speed should be for all spells available. Those shouldn't be an exception, and that's what makes the sorcerer an A minus in my opinion. Yes, they do a tremendous amount of damage, especially if you have two sorcerers in the party, but if you think about it, that means you will have two sorcerers, a mage, and most likely a fighter or a warrior. So yeah, A minus. Mystic Spearhand. Well, in my opinion, this is an A plus. Mystic Spearhand makes the best out of both worlds when it comes to damage output. It uses physical damage, it uses magical damage, so if you put those things together, you can actually get tremendous amount of damage coming out per hit when using the Mystic Spearhand. They are also able to use some sort of heavy armor, so they will be very resistant to damage, very resistant to knockdown as well. And all those things combined, Mystic Spearhand, it's an absolutely beast of a vocation. The problem is, in my opinion, and this is why I put it as an A, probably an A plus, but not a tier S, is that mastering these skills, it's actually pretty hard. You have to learn how to use the R1 skill to stun your enemies, and you have to learn how to maneuver the Mystic Spearhand using the abilities and the weapon skills correctly and in the right order. So it requires quite some skill from our side to master the Mystic Spearhand. If you do, it's an absolute beast of a build and an absolutely monster of a vocation. But because of that obstacle, that small obstacle, I would go that this is a tier A plus. Magic Archer, in my opinion, this comes as an A tier vocation. Now, absolutely easy to master. You don't even require that much skill to play as a magic archer, to be honest. As long as you set up your build right, you have the right weapon, you upgrade it the right way, you have a good enough set of armor, and you have the party, your pawns programmed the right way with a fighter or a warrior to get their attention, a mage to do the healing, and maybe a thief to do a bit of extra damage on the side. uh, you're good to go. The enemies will most likely completely ignore you, and the magic archer has the number one ultimate skill in the game when it comes to damage output. No ultimate skill does as much damage as the ultimate skill for the magic archer at the cost of their own HP. Yes, but you'll be able to one-shot a Drake if you do it the right way. So with that being said, Magic Archer is a winner when it comes to damage. The reason why I make it a tier A and not a tier S is the fact that you have pretty much no way at all to do damage at close quarters. So if you find yourself cornered and you have two or maybe three enemies surrounding you because the fighter didn't do their job or the warrior didn't do their job, you will find yourselves in a bit of a pickle. And because of that weakness, I will say that Magic Archer is also tier A. Now, the Trickster. The Trickster actually surprised me. I didn't expect the Trickster to be as good as it revealed to be once I actually used it the right way. And because of that, I qualify the Trickster as being a tier B. It's not a tier C as the Mage. It's actually a tier B in my opinion. If you use the Trickster the right way, you have absolute control of the battleground. You might not be doing any damage. It's not your job to do the damage, but it is your job to designate what's going on the battlefield. You will be the one using your simulacrum to get your enemy's attentions. So you can place the simulacrum in a place, and all the enemies will be attacking your shadow while your party members do all the damage. And if you have the trickster in the right party, you don't even need a fighter. You don't even need a warrior. All you need is a mage, two sorcerers, and you will not believe how broken being the trickster can be. If you use it the right way, and there's a build video on my channel um, for the trickster that works wonders for this, you won't need to worry about having a pawn being the tank. You just won't need a tank. You and your shadow, your simulacrum, will be the tanks. And in the meantime, your two sorcerers will be doing so much damage that nothing stays alive. It's an absolutely fun and curious way to play the game. When I first heard about the Trickster, I expected something completely different. I thought it would be a vocation more inclined to using magic to apply debilitations to enemies. So you would be poisoning your enemies, you would be confusing your enemies and make them attack each other, or you would be setting them on fire, or you would be freezing them. It would be a more debilitation based damage output. But no, it's not. Trickster doesn't do any damage. It's all about the illusions. And the way you use those illusions and the way you set up your party makes all the difference when it comes to the Trickster. Now, the reason why I make the Trickster a tier B and not a tier A is exactly the absence of damage. If the Trickster was able to do all the things it actually does, but still do some kind of damage, it would definitely be a tier A. But because they don't do any damage at all, I am forced to put them at a tier B. And finally, the warfare. Warfare, in my opinion, is the only vocation that falls under the tier S. And the reason being, the most broken builds you can come up with in this game are by using the Warfarer to combine two, sometimes even three, of the other vocations. Whatever your style, as a Warfarer, you will be an absolute monster. And the fact that you can use heavy armor and still be lightweight, it just makes you an absolute sponge when it comes for damage. You will be able to sustain a lot of damage without worrying that you need to use a curative, because your Gandalf, or in your mage in this case, will keep you alive. But the combinations you can come up with as a warfare not only makes the vocation interesting and gives it a lot of versatility, it makes it strong, it makes it powerful. You can combine the sorcerer augural flare with the magic archer bow, or the thief daggers doing tremendous amount of damage. It's just an absolute beast of a vocation. And that's the reason why in my list it's the only one that comes under tier S. If you want to check any of my actual build videos for every single vocation, feel free to do so. They are all on the channel. Please subscribe if you haven't yet, and thank you all for your support. I'll see you in the next one. See ya.